All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Regeneration series here in Fayetteville, Tennessee, land originally belonging to the Eastern Band of Cherokee. And I'm on screen today with Sarah Savory, who's coming to us from the northern part of Zimbabwe from her home. Was able to speak with Sarah earlier this year when I was in Zimbabwe. We met in Harare in early March and have been in conversation since then about trying to reconnect and talk about all that has happened in the last 6 months, which has been a lot everywhere. So welcome, Sarah. Thank you for being here. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Felix. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Well, let's just jump right into it. So the obvious thing that's happened since we saw each other in March was COVID. So, what's that been like for you in Zimbabwe? And I know you're not in the capital, you're not in Harare, you're out in the rural communities, the communal lands. And what has that been like for you to be in that situation?
Well, since COVID started, so just after I saw you, actually, I haven't been able to travel much to the communal lands or anything, but stayed in touch with people there. So I've done a lot of online work, and I'm actually traveling in a couple of days' time out there, and I'll be there for a couple of weeks. But I think communal lands and stuff, they're sort of less affected by it because they live very differently. Healthier outdoors, no electromagnetic pollution, and they eat only fresh foods that they grow type thing. And I think the cities have been affected quite a lot more. We have very big townships and things that are very high density. So I think they've been affected a lot more. I don't know, Zimbabwe or Africa as well. It seems to have not had the same issues with COVID that the rest of the world or a lot of the world have seen. We haven't seen a huge number of cases and things like that. So I don't know if it's because Zimbabweans are also pretty hardy and they've got they've strong systems and fitter and outdoors, and I don't know. There's all sorts of factors I think that have made it not as bad here so far. It's just like we've all been waiting for it to happen, and it hasn't actually hit us like it has hit a lot of the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know you talked a little bit about just having to live in a bubble as a result. Anyway, how is it? All the precautions of trying to limit the spread. How has that really affected you and your family during this period, and changed how you're working and doing things?
Yeah, that changed a lot initially. So we did have a lockdown, like a proper lockdown, where we were, our schools are still closed, most of them, and things like that. But we had limited travel and things like that for a period of time. So it changed a lot because I was homeschooling kids, and then I was working a lot more online. So I sort of took on a lot more work because I wasn't traveling all over the place, dropping kids off and fetching them and going to meetings. So all my work was online, and then when things started to go a little bit back to normal, and I was taking my kids school didn't open, but we were taking a couple of them just to learn together, because I think it's important for kids to stay, interacting with their friends, especially when they're little. Suddenly driving around and had taken on a lot more than work that I could handle when you're out and about. So it made me realize just how much time we spend, traveling and in cars and stuff when we've got kids and got to get them to various things. So it's just been a very strange feeling, and I don't think Zimbabwe has been anywhere near as what it is in Zimbabwe is we have these restrictions and things, but those decisions that work in first world countries really don't work here, and it's a good example of a reductionist decision without considering the unique social, economic, and environmental issues we're dealing with, because we have a lot of people that live hand to mouth. So we had people starving to death, and so would people rather actually just starve to death or risk getting COVID, where they have a 98 point, I don't know what the percentage is of not dying. So it's been a very that lockdown was very difficult for Zimbabweans, and then what they do is just we've got a saying in Zimbabwe that we just make a plan, because everything has been thrown at us, including the kitchen sink, and we always make a plan. So day to day, we've got so much more going on. And I think COVID's just like, oh, well, we've just got another thing to deal with. And it's quite far down on our list, from getting food, clean water, petrol, power cuts, all of these other things. So, yeah, it's a different situation, I think, for the world. But, we're renowned for making plans countrywide, from communities to the town people. We know how to make a plan and get around things.
Right. I think a little bit the same when we're in a rural community. So we haven't had even as much, even though we're in the US, which is really struggling with it. We haven't had as much here because it's low population density. People are mostly living pretty much in their own kind of, rural farm spaces. There's not a whole lot of social interaction except for, maybe shopping once a week or something. So it's been a bit similar here. But if we kind of stand back from kind of one local context and think about this overall kind of sort of global situation that's happening, do you see COVID as something that's purely health in sort of an aberration, or do you see it as something that's connected to the larger kind of environmental sort of crisis that we're facing at the particular moment?
I think without question, everything is connected. And sorry, my dogs are barking. I think it's, the more, so our entire health and wealth of every human on the planet is directly tied to the health of our land, because everything we consume or use comes from the land or goes back to the land. And the more unnaturally it's produced, the more it's going to affect us when we eat it. And it's also the more it's going to damage the actual soil that it's in, which gives us all our, good bacteria, keeps us healthy, etc. And these pandemics are absolutely related, because our collective health is getting worse and worse and worse and worse, because it's a knock-on consequence of all our decisions. Almost every decision, or with every financial transaction a human being makes, we damage the land somewhere, and that just automatically knocks on to damage the stability and health and wealth of our societies and our what's the word I'm looking for? Of civilization. Yes, it's definitely a symptom, and I think a lot of the ways it's been handled is reductionist, which is causing even more knock-on symptoms. So while humans are in reductionist thinking, which is reducing all our decisions, genetically hardwired way of making decisions in the context of a need, desire, or to address a problem. So those are the fundamental reasons all humans make decisions. So what we've done is we've gone, we've got this crisis, we've got to sanitize our hands, for example, sanitize our schools, sanitize our buses, sanitize whatever. So that decision is made in the context of the problem, with no thought to the long-term knock-on consequences. So if you're permanently putting chemicals on your hands, it's going into our waterways, it's going into everything, it's going into our skin. So what it's doing is lowering your good bacteria, which just means that when you do get sick, you're going to get sicker. And not only that, the environmental disasters we're going to be dealing with from the amount of chemicals we're using is going to be insane, and then that will knock on to cause an economic crisis. So we're just stuck on this hamster wheel of reductionist decision making with no further thought to the knock-on consequences to our health.
Yeah. So it's kind of this feedback loop that we're really exacerbating a lot of the same things that got us here, instead of really trying to adjust to the underlying sort of causality of what's happening. It seems like
we're using the same decision making. Well, it's our decision making process, which has become reductionist because it was designed for a time when we had just sticks and stones, and the way we make decisions now towards needs, desires, or problems, we make a decision to react or adapt to a problem, we cause more problems, and our decision-making process makes us react or adapt to that problem. So you can see it's just this spinning hamster wheel of death, that until we change the root cause of what's causing those knock-on consequences, we're not going to get anywhere. And we're not, and I was like, all these things, land degradation and reductionist decision-making is the root cause of our climate changing. And we're never going to adapt to climate change or land degradation. So holistic decision-making, when you're making the decision, you still have your needs, desires, or problems, but you're addressing those in a holistic context where you're checking the complexity that they exist within. So you're testing how they're going to affect long-term. So yeah, that's...
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of wired for this fight or flight sort of mentality to problem solving, but now we're actually the source of our own problems, and so it's sort of hard to run from ourselves, and so we kind of are in this sort of wheel of just sort of going in a circle. You're talking about it a little bit already, but I know you've been writing and vlogging a lot about what's going on, but like we spoke in March about kind of your work around holistic context decision making and sort of the logic and sort of thought system behind that. But for you, have there been any kind of aha moments or sort of additional sort of kind of layers of sort of explanation or analysis that have come out of seeing the whole world kind of shaken at one time together in this pandemic crisis?
I think I'm always thinking about the connections of the complexity going on around us, and I think what's happened is the aha moment, or not even an aha moment, is I hope that this is going to make everybody realize how connected we all are. Every single human on the planet is connected, and no human on the planet is going to survive without a healthy soil. And so I think a good thing that will come of this is, which holistic management does, is make sure that you tie your health and wealth individually or collectively to the health of your environment. So I'm hoping that from all of this, it will just start to join the dots, that we don't have thousands of problems to solve. We have thousands of symptoms of one problem, and everything is connected. So we need to stop. Instead of, because we have such a mechanistic worldview, we view, and we're so obsessed with technology, we have viewed the world as a machine made up of parts that we can isolate and manipulate and manage in separation from the rest of it. But nature, we aren't machines. We exist in natural systems made up.
Oops, Sarah, we lost you for a second. Let's see if you can come back on.
What happened? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're back. Yeah, that signal went away, but you're back. So great.
Oh, it wasn't even my signal.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Somewhere we lost you, but you're back now. So excellent.
I don't remember where I was at. I was something about. Oh, should I just continue where I was?
Yeah, please just pick on up.
So what we've discovered is we have this mechanistic worldview, but nature and the two things we manage, nature and ourselves, are not mechanistic. We live in these incredibly complex natural systems that are made up of billions of parts of individual wholes and patterns. So sorry, I lost my train of thought because my daughter keeps irritating me. You can edit that part. So we exist we're natural in natural systems which there are no parts of, because everything is interconnected in those natural systems, and it's made up of wholes and patterns. So instead of this mechanistic worldview where we isolate parts and try to manage them and manipulate them, what happens as soon as we manipulate a part, we cause a knock-on effect to something else, because that thing doesn't exist in isolation of the rest. So when I'm explaining it to kids, I always think of your body. So you're a whole you, but whole you is made up of about 40 trillion cells, and each of those cells is a whole, and then those form bigger holes, lungs, nose, hair, fingers, bigger holes, bigger holes, bigger holes, until they make up whole you. And then whole you can't exist in isolation of other things. So the next whole after you, the things you cannot survive without, is food and water and oxygen. And how do we get those? We get those from green plants growing on regenerating soils, converting the sun's energy through photosynthesis. So we cannot exist without that being healthy. And so that's why you can see how connected the health and wealth, and so physical and financial stability of our societies, or just ourselves as individuals, is entirely interconnected with the health of the land. And that's what holistic management does, is instead of having a mechanistic and narrow thought process, we develop a holistic context, which is a very profound statement, tying your physical and financial health, so your life, your quality of life, to the health of your land. So you describe in your context what you want the quality of life that you want to have, and you tie that to the stability of the land, because you cannot have any quality of life if your land is dying. And this pandemic is a good example of that. Is our quality of life has been reduced because we're not understanding that we are affecting our quality of life and our financial stability of globally, of all civilization, by making decisions that knock on to affect our land and our economies and our societies.
I know you do a lot of education work, and it's really always interesting to talk with you, because I think people have this sort of perception, based on their interpretation of your father's work, that this is really only a holistic context work, is really just about agriculture, it's about grazing, or it's about conservation, and it sort of exists in these individual silos or in this one box. And I think from the previous interviews that we've done, people have said, oh wow, she's really thinking about this in application to all aspects of society. The holistic context is inclusive of everything. It's not sort of bundled into the agricultural sector. Then you stop with that kind of thinking there. I know your work is really working with younger people, trying to get younger people into kind of this understanding of what this decision making looks like. And even this weekend, you were out kind of doing an experiential learning process with a bunch of young people. Just tell me a little bit more about like that. How does this, this kind of conceptual framework, what do you do experientially to take people out and help them sort of understand, like, this is what this means, because you talk about how sort of flexible and sort of adaptive young people are, but what is it that you kind of help them see when they're looking at the world that maybe they're not seeing if they're in school or in the city all the time?
Yeah, so just to go to the first part of what you said, I just say to people, if they think that this is nothing to do with them, because this is all about tying our livelihoods, our quality of life to the land, just ask somebody if they eat food. Wherever you are, you got everything we eat, everything we consume or use comes from the land somewhere. So what is vital is to understand how your decisions impact that, and then what I teach with that, especially with kids, is ecological literacy, because you have to understand why your decisions impact the land and how they impact the land, to give you informed choices of what to support when you're making choices, daily choices of food, like where did this food come from? How was it grown? How was that land regenerated, etc. So in holistic management, there's 4 key insights that made it possible. The first was the decision-making side, that nature only functions in wholes and patterns. And when you're making a decision, every decision you make, almost every decision you make, will impact that whole. That's the complexity that you exist within, and that your decisions will impact. So in holistic management, we address a problem. In normal instinctive management, we address a problem from the what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word? I've gone blank. Perspective. Sorry, the perspective of the problem. In holistic management, you address the problem in a holistic context, so from the perspective of the whole. And so that's the first insight, that all our decisions affect those dimensions. And then the second key insight was that the world's ecosystem, so we are in one huge ecosystem, that's the massive whole, is made up. You can judge it on a continuum from non-brittle environments to very brittle environments. So a non-brittle environment is a very humid area, so it depends how humidity is distributed throughout the year. And in non-brittle environments, plant material breaks down very quickly. And you go all the way up to a brittle environment like we live in here in Zimbabwe. It's very brittle because we have short rainy seasons followed by 9 months of very dry arid seasons. So that's a brittle environment. And what we've discovered is that non-brittle and brittle environments at either end of that scale, they respond very differently to the same influences. So non-brittle environments, if you rest non-brittle environments and let them recover, they will recover. In brittle environments, when we rest them to try and make them recover, it's actually killing them, because all the world's brittle environments, which makes up about 2/3 of the planet's landmass, developed with huge herds of grazing animals that were kept bunched together and on the move by pack hunting predators. So what I teach the students, like now when we go out into the bush, is you can look across a grassland and I'll say to the students, does that look healthy to you? And they'll say, yeah, it looks like there's quite a lot of grass. And then we walk into it and I make them look down, and there'll be space, huge gaps between every grass plant. Now that is very advanced desertification, when there's bigger and bigger gaps. So the more we leave that land to rest and it doesn't have that correct animal impact, it's dying, because what the animals are designed to do, and then what I get the students to do is get them to try and dig into that soil, and it's absolutely rock hard. It's like concrete and it's capped. So that soil is desertified, the soil is capped. And then I explain practically and show them practically how the animals are designed to keep that soil aerated, covered, protected, and fertilized. Is they come along, a huge herd of animals, and I say, think of an impala's tiny little footprints. An impala is a little antelope that we have, and they have very, very sharp little hooves that splay out when they walk. So you just need to, and I get a little stick, and I say, imagine 1 million of these going across the land, and they just start to break up the soil surface. So immediately you've got some breaking up of the soil surface, and then we go through all the animals, like the shape of their hooves, and I say, okay, imagine a kudu, which is a big antelope, and it's got also hooves that splay out, but they're round, and then a buffalo, which is just like a cow's hoof. So they're all designed to impact the surface of the soil differently and break it up and aerate it. And then it's not just their hooves, it's their mouths. So the impalas have tiny little mouths that will eat a different part of the grass plant than a great big elephant coming along with his trunk, eating the thicker stems. And also the thick of the elephant with his huge feet, trampling down the thicker grasses. So as they move, they're aerating the soil with their hooves, they're fertilizing the soil, dung and urine, And the microorganisms that need to biologically break down the plant material are getting moisture, because it's an long arid season, through the ruminant's guts. So it's this amazing, like, complex relationship and symbiotic relationship with the grass. So then once they've flattened down that grass, you've got a perfect soft soil, thick grass, like a big mulch over that grass. And that's what herding animals are designed to do. So don't ever let anybody tell you that those animals cause damage. It's our management that causes animals to behave unnaturally that causes the damage. Because what we've done is, for example, with elephants, we fenced off national parks, and we took out the villages. So we took out their apex predator, and adults only predators, and an adult elephant's only predator is humans. So we took out a predator and we fenced them off. So immediately the elephants started behaving unnaturally, and we blamed the elephants. And the same with livestock. It's not the livestock that are causing damage, it's our management. So we domesticated them, we protected them from predators. So they stay too long, they overgraze, they overtrample. So it's all about very, very precise timing. And that's where in holistic management, the tool of holistic planned grazing of livestock comes in, because we don't have the wildlife numbers needed to do what they need to do on the land. So we need to use livestock to help us. So that's getting people to realize that. And then with the kids, what we do is we, because that soil, that soil surface is so hard and completely impacted by rain and no animals aerating it and whatever. Now when the rain falls on that ground, it's just like hitting concrete. So it just hits it and runs off the surface. And that's why we have non-effective rainfall. So it doesn't matter how much rain we have, we don't have an effective rainfall. So it hits the ground, runs off the top, takes our precious topsoil with it, what's left of it. And that's what causes flash flooding and silting of rivers. And it's not only the water cycle, so then we teach them about mineral cycle. And if water can't get into the soil, neither can oxygen circulate, carbon, nitrogen. Nothing can circulate. It's all cyclical, because under our feet, there's millions and millions and billions and trillions of microorganisms, earthworms, all sorts of things. The soil is a living, breathing thing, roots, and they need to get their sun's energy indirectly. So it needs to be carried down through the soil with all of these things. So if you block the soil, you can't get this thing cycling. And then we teach them about community dynamics, which is biodiversity. So the more biodiverse, the more stable the whole ecosystem. And then we talk about energy flow again, which is the sun's energy. So we just use practical demonstrations to show the importance of animal impact in those situations. And then in very humid environments, the reason rest is a good tool for recovery is because they're constantly humid and microorganisms are constantly breaking down the plant material, and they develop with very different types of animals. So they develop with things snaily and sluggy and like little hedgehogs, and so no massive herds of animals. That was long. Sorry.
It's very good. So I think that's what's really powerful about, I think, why the work that your family is doing is so not just motivational, but just emotionally powerful to people, because you can go out and see what's happening. It's just such clear in the different management spaces in Zimbabwe, from the holistic center to the national parks to the conventionally managed areas to the more communally managed areas that are working with people using holistic approaches. There's just, I think, just visually clear, as you say, once you walk out there and start looking at what you're actually seeing and do some analysis. It's very significant. The look of the land, the number of species that are there, it's just a very, very significant reality that you live in, that you can see how this kind of way of working is transformative to the landscape.
It's amazing, and it's amazing how people don't see it until you show them. Mm-hmm. It's really incredible, and the thing I love about this children is they get it quickly. Adults just have this blockage, first of all, about livestock, but also they don't have that ecological literacy about, because what they do, and this is a lot of the problem, is people get very narrowly trained in specific fields with no knowledge of the whole. So this is the problem with reductionist management, is people will often look at the whole, but they look at it from the perspective of what they've been trained in. So if somebody's been trained in finance, he'd be like, okay, I've looked at that whole picture and this is my advice on the financial. But he doesn't think, well, that financial is tied to the social and tied to the ecological. So it's going to cause knock-on consequences if I don't consider them simultaneously. And then your ecological expert will look at the whole from his narrow perspective, and that your social. So they think they've looked at the whole, but at the point of their decisions, they've narrowed it down to those sections. And then what they did was create these sort of interdisciplinary teams of scientists, and they look at the whole from the perspective of, again, a few things. And so what holistic management does is you have the whole, and you get into that whole yourself. You create the perspective, and you then look out at your expert advice, and they will give you advice from their narrow points of view. And you say, okay, well, is that socially, culturally, and environmentally sound for me at any given time? And the other example I give to my students about decision making is that we are all dealing with entirely unique complexity. So I don't have the same social, cultural, or economic issues or environmental issues as you. So if I'm going into a shop, so this is, I went into a shop, for example, the other day. I had to get lunch on my way somewhere, and I was in the middle of nowhere. It was the only place to get lunch. And I walk in, and I'm running all my decisions through a holistic context. So when I'm about to make a decision, I'm like, okay, let me stop there, because that's instinctive. And I'm going to test that decision is leading me towards my holistic context, which is my quality of life tied to the health of my land. And there were chips. There was biltong, which is dried meat. There were rolls with eggs, bacon, whatever. And I quickly ran through all of those choices, and I chose biltong because that was the least environmentally damaging. I could afford it. It's within my cultural beliefs. Okay, so that was, for me, the best possible decision I could make in that situation on that day to lead me towards my context. But you might come in and you can't eat kosher meat that's not kosher. Maybe the meat wasn't kosher, or you might not be able to afford biltong. So you've got to make the best possible decision for you in that situation. So it's proactively making decisions every single day of your life that will lead you to that quality of life tied to your life supporting environment. So it can't be perfect, but it makes sure you're always making the best possible decision in any situation. So it's proactively always leading you better and better and better and better. So, yeah.
Yeah, another project we've been working on is around peace building, and kind of this idea of a peace-focused lens for peace building. And in some ways, it's very similar, because we find with peace builders, people are always problem solving. And the problem that they're solving, when they solve that problem, it's only created another problem. And so we're sort of trying to advocate, can you look to what the peace, where is it you're trying to end up, and work backwards from that sort of place of peace and functionality in the best case scenario, because otherwise you're simply caught in this trap of trying to take on one thing at a time, and you're never going to get. Those decisions create their own problems, as opposed to really being understanding what it is you're trying to achieve. And I feel like the holistic context is that this is everything together. This is how you need to make sense of everything, and not just get into this very rapid problem solving, which is just sort of kind of knocking one thing down and starting another fire as you beat one out. It just sort of seems it is sort of very sort of frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just always tying that quality of life to your environment. If you make this decision and it's damaging, then don't make it, or just try and find the best possible one at that time, and you'll always be bringing about the life that you want. But that's where the ecological literacy is so vital, because we've got people out there who are trying to make better decisions, but they're narrowing their decisions without thinking of the knock-on consequences of those decisions, because they don't understand that it's management that's resulting in. So, for example, I'm going to talk about factory farming. That's management. It's not livestock that do anything. I mean, the livestock didn't put themselves into factory farms and feed themselves damaging food and be awful. And that's a terrible reductionist management decision. But that's also institutional stupidity. So because we are all in reductionist thinking, when we make any big decisions, we do it through organizations. And so when we form an organization, it takes on a life of its own. We literally create these monsters. So we don't have bad people that are doing terrible things. We have these organizations where the reductionist decisions and the policies and decisions that will come out of these organizations completely lack any humanity. They completely lack common sense, because an organization doesn't think like an individual, and an organization cannot be held responsible for anything. So they just address their problems and meet their immediate objectives with no further thought to the knock-on consequences, because they can't get blamed if things go wrong. So no individual would have ever developed industrial agriculture. No individual would have put animals in factory farms. No individual would kill the soil with poisons and cause all of those knock-on consequences. That's institutional, and that's what we're working really hard to try and stop. Because while we can understand it, most people can understand it to an extent on an individual level. Some people get it deeper or whatever. But where we do have to break through is to get our governments and organizations developing policies within a holistic context that ties everybody in that country, ties collective health and wealth and economic stability and social stability to the health of the land. So right now, every government in the world, every ministry will develop policy for that particular ministry in isolation of all the other ministries, but they're all connected. So you've got health, you've got environment, you've got social, you've got finance, all narrowing their policy decisions with no common context to a problem in that ministry, which just snowballs the effects there. Whereas if every ministry was making decisions towards a holistic context, tying the nation's stability to the health of the land, you'd have a completely different outcome. You would have policies that were socially, culturally, and environmentally sound straight away. That's how simple it is. But institutions won't change when there's new thinking like this until enough of the public are insisting that they change.
Mm-hmm. You're talking a lot about kind of the complexity side, the social layers, the sort of social context in which all these decisions are made. In the U.S., in the last 4 months, we've had not only COVID as sort of the thing that the country is really kind of struggling with, but also kind of a period of racial reconciliation where Black Lives Matter has really been as significant in sort of shaping the consciousness of what's happened, and sort of the sense that this is just a critical moment to make some decisions about how we want to be in the world. And I think that has sort of led to a lot of reflection in all sectors of American life, and in the regenerative agriculture area as well. There's a lot of reflection on how the history of sort of race and slavery has been part of the sort of food system, how the sort of elimination of sort of Black farmers has been a part of what's happened in the last 100 years, and the need to sort of create a more diversified farm ownership and bring that sort of back into the conversation. Eco-agricultural processes for more indigenous ways of thinking, all these things sort of beginning to come back into the conversation as sort of a nexus of these. But for you, I mean, you're in Zimbabwe, and there's been so much sort of work around racial reconciliation over the last 40 years since the country became independent. How does that connect up with your experience and the work that you do around holistic context decision making?
Well, as you were talking about America and all of that, again, I'm thinking of things in a holistic context. And what a holistic context does is, when you develop a holistic context, your first is your quality of life, your values. You describe your values, and you've got to respect that everybody has different values and cultures. But at the end of the day, you're all human, and none of these conversations are going to matter one little bit, because we're all on in this boat, black, white, male, female, young, old, whoever we are, we're all in the same boat together, and we're all under threat because of how we make our decisions. And the same thing, all of these things are a result of reductionist decisions in the past having social consequences. It's people forcing decisions on other people without respecting their cultural and financial sort of situation. So we need to just take people above that into, we are all human, but we all have our individual values and things like that. So for example, in Africa, when we're teaching in communities, and I've just been part of writing a book actually on bringing back our sort of the communities and Africans bringing back their own cultural food and things like that, which is perfect because holistic decision making, you're respecting your own cultural values. So you can't just copy and paste from someone else. So and that's why we grow all this maize in Africa, which is not the right crop in many situations, and also monocropping isn't correct, because nowhere in nature do you see one species in one place. So it's bringing back cultural values and respecting everybody's individual situation. So I love this because it empowers people to make decisions with their own values and their own beliefs, but it unites people at the same time beyond their differences. And we were talking a bit earlier before we started recording, is Zimbabwe is a very, very unique country. It has very unique people, and we have this unbelievable sense of community in Zim. And yes, there's racism, yes, there's corruption, but in general, it's a very connected society, and we're all very proudly Zimbabwean. I think it's a very the people are very proud, and I don't know, just you've been here. How do you feel when you've been to Zim? Isn't it a very different feeling than a lot of places you've been?
Yeah, I mean, I think, comparing it to South Africa, the sort of sense of calm, safety, and the sense of that, the transition to independence was a very significant power shift, but it really hasn't marginalized the white community. And I think in South Africa, there's still very much a kind of power struggle between the white communities and sort of the black governmental structure that exists now. But in Zimbabwe, it feels like there's much more of a ongoing conversation about how to figure out what to do. And it seems like there's sort of, actual legislation, like right now, legislation about reparations for land that was included in the redistribution process, how to compensate people for the assets on the farm. There's sort of this ongoing conversation that actually translates into policy. The things are happening, and I feel like it's never put to the side. It's always brought to the table, and people are continuing to work on it. And even analysis of things that are controversial, like land distribution, when people look at it closely, they see that a lot of things actually did come out of it that were positive. It was a very radical decision when it was taken, but a lot of those farms that were created in that process have been, successful at the same time. So it's just a very interesting example of working on this in a very deliberate and long-term way. And I do think, as you say, in the communities, you get a very communal feel of people working and living and interacting quite comfortably, which I find really impressive, because I think that's something that happens in some places in the U.S. and in some places in the U.S. that is not the case at all.
Yeah, the land distribution, the whole thing was it actually was, Mugabe was working with my father on it to train people how to use the land, and then put people on the land who were trained how to manage land, and that all fell apart, and Mugabe lost control. So he lost control of it, and again, just a knock-on consequence of corruption and losing control. So it didn't go at all to plan. But we've moved past that, and we've got some incredible people in agriculture, the black farmers, white farmers, community farmers, all working together. I'm actually going to a solutions retreat with a whole lot of Regen ag farmers in Vic Falls next week. And I've just been invited onto a Zimbabwe agricultural think tank with, all races, all colors. You know what? At the end of the day, we're all just Zimbabweans who want to make a difference. And for me, I grew up in a time when there was a lot of racism, and my father went into politics and ran against Ian Smith, which was a very racist government. And I grew up very differently to a lot of other white kids my age, because and just what I'm getting at is racism is taught. Mm-hmm. And I always say to my kids, it's just, there's nasty people and there's nice people, and it doesn't matter what color they are. It's just whether that person's nice or not. That's how you judge people. Is, don't ever judge people by the color of their skin. I said they were like, oh, but the whole world's blaming Chinese people for COVID, and I said, you know what? There's lots of horrible Chinese people, but there's lots of lovely Chinese people. It's not a color thing. It's a human thing. It's just, again, at the end of the day, these things are taught. If you don't teach a child to be a racist, it's never going to be a racist. It's not going to. Children don't see color, and that's how I think we should bring up everybody. Is we're all just human beings and respect our cultural differences, and it doesn't matter. It's so silly to me. It's just like, wow, this is just crazy that we're fighting about these things when we're just all human beings.
Mm. Yeah. I guess that's kind of my last question to you. I mean, I feel like it's just been a really hard year for people everywhere, but I think it's also been a year, like I just saying, that has just caused a lot of reflection for people, just because we've had to stop in so many ways the things that we have just been doing out of habit, and sort of just kind of this, just momentum. We've been carried through habits for so long because that's the way that it was. And we've suddenly realized that, things not just in one country, but everywhere can come to a grinding halt immediately because we make a choice to do that there's something that necessitates it. What for you do you think, looking back on this, is going to be, the lasting impact of this year? Do you see some challenges that we are going to be dealing with, or some actual opportunities that this sort of very strange moment has actually opened people's eyes to?
Both. I see a lot of knock-on consequences, like I was saying, about the chemicals, about not like Africa making the same decisions as first world countries, again, because they're not making them in the same social, environmental, and economic context. So I see a lot of knock-on challenges, but I also see a lot of potential for people to realize how important our natural world is, and to bring ourselves back into balance with that natural world, and understand that we are not machines. We do exist within these complex wholes, and luckily we don't have to understand the gazillions of connections. We don't have to understand them. We just have to understand that we exist within them, and that all our decisions impact all those dimensions with almost every decision we make. So just joining the dots, everything is connected. And I often use the UN. People always say, oh, but the great UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I'm like, yeah, but they're addressing them as individual things when they're all connected. If they took all those goals and addressed those within a holistic context, rather than problems, reducing the decisions to problems within each goal, they would suddenly have a very different outcome, because those are all complexes connected. And if they had an overarching holistic context to guide all of those goals, because they're all knock-on symptoms of our management, we'd see a very different picture. So it's just asking humans to like make this fundamental and emotional shift that doesn't come naturally. So it takes a bit of practice, and we have such a mechanistic worldview that if I say to you right now, you have to pick up your phone and you can't use it because there's a software update, you'd immediately upload that software and you'd learn to use it. it's exactly this. We have the same decision-making process that we've used for 2 million years. It's like a genetically embedded software that needs an update because our technology has come quite a long way from sticks and stones. So I would say to the world, after COVID, we're all connected. Now you can see how connected we are. And this decision-making process acknowledges that and connects all of us. So if you update your software to a new reason for making decisions, which is much more profound for the complexity we've created, will change everything. And it takes a little practice at first to make decisions in a different context. But it's pretty quick after you've done it for once you practice it, just like a software update. So if we can get individuals doing that and seeing how decisions change, we'll have individuals seeing how important it is to put pressure on organizations to change. So that's my hope that's come of this realization of connecting everything.
Super. Well, Sarah, thank you for your insights. Thank you for your work and your advocacy and your work with policymakers and young people and trying to work on kind of both sides of the equation there in Zimbabwe, and for your willingness to speak to people like myself to share what you and all of your colleagues are doing with holistic management and holistic context decision making to really try to put the pieces together and really see the bigger picture of what this is about and not get lost in the weeds of just individual problems that we're trying to deal with, and see that we're all really trying to solve one problem, as you said, and that maybe can take some of the overwhelm out of the situation, that there's really just one thing that we really have to get right, and then everything else can begin to fall into better place for everyone in every place if we manage to think in that way. So thank you for your time. And
sorry, I was just going to say, it makes things seem a lot less overwhelming that all our problems are connected, and if we change the root cause, which is how we make decisions, the outdated decision making process, then we're just automatically making those things fall away. And I listen to people often, and they'll be arguing and saying, what do we do about this? And I'm like, that's a symptom. You can ignore the symptom completely. If we treat the root cause, that symptom will fall away. And if we don't treat the root cause, we're never going to get anywhere. Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you. Sorry, I have talked and talked and talked.
No, that's exactly what I come here to do is to hear exactly what you've been doing, and it's great that you've been working so hard throughout COVID and really trying to reach out and share these ideas with so many people. So again, I thank you for your time and willingness to work with us here at the Regenerative School, and look forward to possible further collaborations and videos and calls and other things that we can organize as we take this work further. But actually, good to see you today.
My children's book coming up.
Okay, tell us about that.
Coming out in it's gone. I've sent the final thing to the publisher, and it'll be printed. So it's a children's book. It's about a dung beetle and a pangolin called That's How We Roll, and they are living on desertified lands, and they meet a secretary bird, and he tells them about a holistically managed regenerated land, and they set off on a journey, and they end up on this regenerated land, and then there's just fact and photo pages at the end to teach about what we've been talking about today, basically. Yeah, so I'm excited about that. So I'll send you some copies as soon as it's
excellent.
out.
We'll definitely include the link here with the text about the interview, so that people can move on and see some of that other kind of advocacy and education work that you're always doing. So great, thank you. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. We appreciate your time and your interest, and we will see you again next time on the Regeneration series. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.